you all for joining us here. It's a very special day for most of us, especially having esteemed guests like Dr. Kak visit us. Dr. Subhash Kak is Regents Professor at Oklahoma State University in Stillwater, and he has held visiting appointments at Imperial College London, Curtin University Perth, TIFR at Harvard University. He has worked in computer science, artificial intelligence, quantum information, and history of science. He has translated several texts from Sanskrit to English, including Vaisheshika Sutra of Kannada and Yoga Sutra of Patanjali. He is the author of 20 books that include Mind and Self, Matter and Mind, and The Wishing Tree, and his autobiography, The Circle of Memory. He discovered a long-lost astronomy of the Vedic period that was published in scholarly journals of the West and India, and in the book, The Astronomical Code of the Rig Veda. He currently serves on the Indian Prime Minister's Science, Technology, Innovation Advisory Council. He was awarded one of the highest Indian civilian awards, Padma Shree, in 2019. He is listed as one of the world's most influential computer scientists of all time in the MIT. With a big round of applause, I request Dr. Subhash Kak to come here and enlighten us. Thank you.
Thank you, Varmaji, and happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
Happy birthday to you. Take more that. Okay. I'm going to be talking about the topic is artificial intelligence and consciousness, and I'll try to relate that to what we all do in temples, which is to get connected to the deepest questions that we have about who we are. But to provide a background, 2 years ago I got a call from SRI International, which is in California. They said the science establishment at the highest levels in the US wanted to put together a team of 15-20 scientists, including physicists, computer scientists, philosophers, neuroscientists, and they wanted me to be a part of it, since I work both in computer science and AI and in quantum mechanics. And the group, so I said yes, and there were people from the government as well, and there were 8 week-long workshops. We would meet, start from 8 in the morning till late in the evening in different places. Didn't go to all of them because I had other engagements. And we met, and the question was, will machines of the future attain consciousness? And it was done through SRI, since consciousness is a very touchy subject. It impinges on religion. So the government wanted to place some distance. So they had SRI run it. And so we had very intense discussions, and we also had a poll at one of the week-long meetings that we had in Cambridge, UK. We had a poll, and we were asked, will computers be able to emulate all that human beings do? That was the first question. And there was universal agreement, yes, all cognitive tasks that human beings do will be done by computers, which of course has the most important implications for humanity as a whole. The second question was, will computers of the future, not now necessarily, not 50 years or 20 years or whatever, of the future have consciousness? And about 50% of the people said yes. And here we are talking of some of the most famous and well-respected scientists of the world. They said yes. I was not one of them. And about 50% said no. The 50% who said yes, and they included neuroscientists and physicists and computer scientists, their argument was that the brain is a machine, and of course we can only emulate it in a very coarse way right now. We can emulate certain modules and so on. But as computing power increases, at some point, once we are able to emulate it entirely, clearly the phenomenon of consciousness that is associated with the brain will also get associated with such a computer. And those of us who thought that this is not going to happen had different reasons. My own reason is that the deepest theory that there is, physical theory that there is quantum mechanics, and computers are not built according to quantum logic. Now, this is one way of looking at it. And I'll return to this question in a moment. Now, the philosophical bases, and I talked to them, they were Europeans or Americans, and I was one Indian. The philosophical bases behind the claim that machines will become conscious was the basis of shunyata. Many of these people were practicing Buddhists, not necessarily in a religious sense, but they were attracted to this idea. So they said, well, the basis of shunyata, emptiness, nothingness, is acknowledged in Buddhism as the space or place from where everything springs, and therefore, although computers really have nothing behind them, or science has nothing behind it, eventually out of this shunyata or emptiness, consciousness would emerge. And those of us who believed that computers will not be conscious were inspired or nodded our hats, metaphorical hats, to Vedanta. And according to Vedanta, behind all appearances is everything, whether you call it Brahman or Ishvara or Chetana or consciousness. And in fact, according to Vedanta, this whole universe is ultimately placed, so to speak, in this large mind or over mind, using common phrases, within consciousness, right? And so since machines don't have that, therefore machines will not be conscious. Now, what's interesting is that a lot of people who believe that computers will attain consciousness, and many of those who also do not even think about it, are quite prepared to cede decision-making and judgment to computers. Literally everybody. Because most of us do not think about the deeper philosophical questions. We are just trying to make by in our lives with all the struggles that we have from day to day. But we are quite prepared. We are so overawed by the power of machines that we are quite prepared to let machines decide what we should be doing. And let me first very quickly talk about the dangers that confront humanity, because I think this is the most dangerous point in the history of mankind. Now you might say, well, what about the Industrial Revolution, right? That was a big disruptive event, but the Industrial Revolution helped us with brawn. We could use machines where we had to use physical force prior, but computers, as all of us agreed in that group, are doing away with the need for brains. That literally all the jobs that we have where judgment is made, machines will be able to, at some point, once they are programmed, once the way a certain judgment is made, and we are all in agreement that all these judgments have definite procedures, which once they have been determined, can be programmed into a machine, and then we won't need the human individual between the consumer and the creator of technology. Now, of course, there is some divided opinion on creative tasks. And therefore, human beings will always be needed, at least a few of them, right? Because it's not so clear as to how to program creativity. But it's quite clear that rather than 8 billion people that we have on Earth, perhaps there would be meaningful jobs only for 1 billion or so. So between now and 100 years from now, there would be a very difficult transitional phase where we don't know whether the politics around the world is wise enough to manage that transition, and so there would be all kinds of troubles that one can foresee, and some of them have already arrived. So this is one side. But now let me, and perhaps we could pick on this later on in our discussion, but let me now go back and go to this question of quantum mechanics that I mentioned very fleetingly. As I said, that as a quantum theorist or as a quantum mechanics person, there is this idea that clearly computers do not use quantum logic, right? And the deepest scientific theory that exists is quantum mechanics. Now, the two things about quantum mechanics. One of the two creators of quantum mechanics was the Austrian Erwin Schrödinger. In the 1920s, physics had reached a dead end, and Schrödinger claims in his autobiography, which he wrote later on, he says the idea that helped him move forward was the Upanishadic Mahavakya, I am Atma Brahma, which in German he wrote as the formula that Atman is Brahman. This was the idea. This was the flash in his mind, which he was able to pick up and connect to the need for a concept which incorporates all possibilities. There are two basic concepts in quantum mechanics. I can give you a 101 quantum mechanics. One of them is that in quantum mechanics, attributes can exist simultaneously even though they are mutually exclusive. Right? In classical world, exclusive properties cannot be associated at the same time with an object. Right? A shoe will be either black or brown. It cannot be both at the same time. In quantum mechanics, they are both at the same time, or many, many more exclusive properties. So this was the idea. And the other idea in quantum mechanics is the idea of observation determining, or observation being that point in time which decides as to what exactly you will see. Right? Now, this is called the collapse. The interaction with the system causes the collapse of the system from many different possibilities to one of them. So that in the classical world, everything is clear. You know, you can have either one thing or the other thing, one property or the other property. Now, Schrödinger and others saw, and I'm not going to go into the details, they saw quantum mechanics as a fulfillment and perfectly consistent with Vedanta. But this is a very interesting connection. Right? Now, the creators of quantum mechanics, including Heisenberg and others, they saw consciousness as separate from materiality. So they don't ever talk about consciousness, they're talking about observers. Right? So the observer is always apart from the physical system that the observer is trying to measure. Right? So in other words, just to cut through the chase, consciousness is apart from physicality. Right? So even though at the deepest level you have unity, in the embodied level, consciousness and the physical world are apart. Right? So this is what quantum mechanics says, at least in its orthodox interpretation. Now some people have tried to go against it and try to construct non-consciousness requiring systems, but they haven't gone very far. And this is precisely what Vedanta is. In Vedanta, in the embodied world, the physical is different from consciousness. Right? And you can see it in many different ways. You can either say, well, as in Vedanta, what is consciousness? That there is a single consciousness, is the singular, just as you have a single outside sun which gets reflected in a million different pots with water, right? It's the same sun, and you have the same, flash of light coming in from all pots of water. So what Vedanta, which is the very heart of Hinduism, is that you have a single consciousness which is within each one of us. Now, why aren't we all geniuses? Because this consciousness is covered through habits that we have picked up through our education, and all these habits are wonderful, but they have actually separated us from our true selves. So there's something counterintuitive out here. And therefore, what is needed to obtain extraordinary insight is for us to somehow, through practice, or if you're lucky, it can happen spontaneously, to cut through this curtain which hides our true self from us and peek inside, even for a moment. And the moment you do that, you're transformed. In fact, all of Hinduism is just this. You see yourself, you're transformed. And that's what yajna, true yajna is. Yajna is sacrifice. What is this sacrifice? Sacrifice of who you were, who you thought you were before this extraordinary experience occurs. And then you are reborn. So it's continuous rebirths. And of course there was this amazing, wonderful, spectacular ceremony which many people had, where the young person, and originally both, even women, girls and boys both had it. And just the other day I tweeted the scriptural reference where the girls also had it. So there was this ceremony which was done when the boy or the girl was young, where they went to the teacher, and the teacher gave the boy or the girl a mantra. And this mantra, the whole idea of the ceremony was to get into a state which is extraordinary. Because, normally we are all comfortable. We are quite happy to have that covering around this bright light within us. We're quite happy because we have inertia, each one of us, right? It's quite happy. But if you are pulled away from it, that's why a lot of the ritual was done early morning, sometimes outside. It was cold, right? And of course there was music, there was this or that, which was to awaken you from your normal state. And if you're lucky, just being in that situation could connect you. You saw something, there was an epiphany, and suddenly you saw things that you had not seen before. Sometimes you awaken and you say, hey, why was I worried about such and such and such for so many months? This doesn't really matter. And you see things in a different light, and then the world is different, right? Because we all make the word. The word, of course, is sankalpa, right? And it's, I believe, Miss Oprah Winfrey has made it very popular, at least not directly, indirectly. So you sankalpa, kalpa means creation, san meaning good creation. If you really want something to happen, truly, with every fiber of your being, the whole world will fall into place and it will happen. Right? So that's what it is. So here is an amazing tradition. We are talking about artificial intelligence, and I've already told you where I stand, that artificial intelligence will only go that far. Computers will of course be everywhere. They'll change life for all of us. And those who fear computers will let computers lead them. But in many ways, it's not very different from what has happened in history. Because in history, many belief systems have wanted people not to question. And the Vedic way is all about questioning. When we were raising our children, people would ask me, my friends and colleagues, what are you teaching your children? I would respond honestly that I want my children to be able to challenge anything, whatever I say or whatever anybody else says. Because it's only through challenge can you discover what the truth is. And And challenge is necessary to awaken oneself. You know, it's that wonderful covering around us. Challenge is somebody asking, hey, what is this here? And then, it's only then that you look. There's this interesting story about this man who's on his, very wise man, he's on his deathbed, and his two sons come to him, and he says, I'm going to give you something, and value it, and then he gives them 2 old jackets, and then he passes away, and one of the sons says, hey, this is an old jacket, it's terrible, what's wrong with my dad, why didn't he save for me, etc. He throws it away. The other one starts questioning, why did my dad give this to me? He looks into it, and he finds that it has some things sticking out. Then he takes it apart, and he says, and he finds that it's full of diamonds. Right? So what the Vedic way is about the most amazing intuitions, most extraordinary intuitions. They're so powerful, they have the capacity to change oneself for all time. Just to give one example, amongst many that I can furnish, and maybe we'll have a dialogue. There is in Vedanta one school which is called Drishti Srishtivada. I don't know if you've heard of it. Drishti Srishtivada. There was a question, there was a debate going on amongst the rishis in India, sages in India. The question was, well, if there is consciousness, how can consciousness do anything to us? Here we are. Consciousness is something ambiguous, you know, it's something, we don't know what it is. Maybe it's light, prakash, right? It's light, but it's light. What can light do to us? And if we say consciousness is divinity, right? That's one way of saying it. We're using ordinary English, which doesn't have all the power to communicate deep insights. For example, Ishvara is the witness or is the experiencer within each one of us. Ishvara is also Shiva, right? So Shiva represents consciousness, right? But if it's consciousness, how can consciousness do anything at all? Right? Because, okay, we have the witness or Ishvara within us, who's the ultimate enjoyer, but then our mind is like a monkey going from one thing to another, being driven by conditioning, right? Whatever we have, or what expectations people have of us, that's how we live our life, right? Not very different from how animals live. Animals are wonderful too. Anybody who has pets see that they're really not all that different from us, right? So, in Drishti Srishtivada, what comes out is that divinity or Ishvara, Vishnu or Shiva or Shakti, how divinity changes the world is through drishti, through observation. It's through observation that creation occurs. Notice the collapse axiom of quantum mechanics. It's through observation that potentiality gets actualized. Right?
Visualize it.
No, actualized. Because at that time it's potential. You can, if you use a wave analogy, there are all these waves, they exist at the same time, right? But the moment you observe it, you get only one of those things, right? So it becomes actualized. And in fact, my friend, very eminent physicist who passed away last year, George Sudarshan, he was from Kerala. Some of you may have heard of him or known him personally. He came up in 1977 with a well-known paper called the quantum Zeno effect. And he showed, in that paper he argued, he and his student, they argued, that in quantum mechanics itself, if you observe a system has its own dynamics, it's going to evolve, right? But if you observe it, you can freeze the dynamics. Or if you observe it in a particular way, you can make it go wherever it wants. Wherever you want. So consciousness can control matter, even though consciousness is apart from matter. And the quantum Zeno effect has been demonstrated in the lab. So it is indeed true. Right? So you might ask, hey, isn't this amazing? How do you understand this tradition? Extraordinary tradition. It's not sectarian. It's not about the small. It's about universal things. And of course, some people who don't understand these things, and some of them are scholars, they say, well, this is, what is Subhash Kak saying? How is this possible? But it's all there that the astronomy, and it's coded in the very structure of the Rig Veda. The Vedic sages knew that the sun and the moon are 108 times their respective diameters from the earth. Have you heard of this before? Right. So I discovered this in 1993. I was reading the New Yorker magazine, this essay by John Updike, and this was a, essay about, hey, the sun and the moon look about the same, and there was an epiphany. You don't really know how the creative thing occurs. I knew it had something to do with the structure of the Rig Veda, rushed to my library, opened the book, and all the numbers fell out. And it's not something mysterious because you could anybody could have easily discovered it. If you take a pole of a certain height and move it 108 times its height, its size would be the same as the size of the sun or the moon, right? The setting sun or the setting moon, setting moon, harder to observe. Setting sun, you can, right? And it's the same size, so 108 times. And modern astronomy has also discovered that the diameter of the sun is 108 times the diameter of the earth. And you can check it later. Not exactly, approximately. These are 107 or 109 or 108. So it's 108 times the diameter of the earth is the diameter of the sun. These amazing things. So what did the rishis do? They said, okay. They said these are all mysteries. Most people don't understand them or they get bored because boredom is the natural condition, right? We don't want to listen. If as all of us dads and moms know, if we tell anything to our children, they will push back. They'll say, what are these guys saying? What do my dad or mom know? And same with any wise person. You go to somebody, so that's why people, when you go to a wise person, they will normally not talk. Because they're going to be misunderstood, right? So what did the rishis do? They said, okay, we'll build this temple where from the front door, right, to the Garbhagriha, we have 108 units. And the perimeter of the temple will be 360, because 360 is the nominal number associated with time, 360 days to the year, right? So you have this. Then we said, okay, how many people are going to notice this? Most people will not notice. Nobody's going to measure how far the Garbhagriha is. So they said, okay, we'll do another thing. Just as you have the outer sun, which illuminates the world and gives us warmth, we have this inner sun, which paradoxically is the same for all of us, but that's too complicated. We're not going to talk about that. So what we are going to do is, we'll tell people, take the name of the god or the goddess 108 times. So you will be making a symbolic journey from the earth, which is your body, to the inner sun, right? Because it's 108 units away, right? Or if you don't want to do that, not everybody wants to do the Japamala, right? It used to be more popular earlier, but not too many people do that. They said, okay, when you're getting older, and you're tired of your job or you're retired, you might want to do a pilgrimage to the 108 Shakti Peeths, or 108 temples in one tradition or the other, right? So they quoted this, or if you don't have time, if you haven't even found out that there are 108 temples, right? Then maybe what we'll do is, everybody is attracted to the arts, and one of the greatest and most attractive of the arts is dance, right? And as you know, Bharata wrote his famous Natya Shastra more than 2000 years ago. And Bharatanatyam is based on 108 vocabulary of 108 karnas, or dance poses. Did you know that? In Bharatanatyam, you have 108 dance poses, and in the composition, you go from one to another, and how you do it becomes a composition. So what the rishis did was to code this deep intuition of the equivalence of the outer and the inner in all these little things, and they left these hints for people to grab onto. And now you might say, well, these are all details. So what? That the sun is 108 times its diameter from the earth, or the moon is 108 times its diameter from the earth, right? So they'll say, so what? And that's a very valid question to have, valid sentiment or opinion or feeling to have. The real purpose behind this all was to tell the individual, look, the world is not what it appears to be. You see that? Why is there despair? There is tremendous despair right now in the world. Why? Especially in the last 20, 30 years. The West had its own wonderful traditions of spirituality, whichever way it expressed them. But in the last 30, 40, 50 years, they only think that all the media, the books, everything is pushing is that you are nothing but your body. Right? It's a body-centric approach to reality. Now, we are not denying that we are bodies, but what the rishis are saying is that while we are bodies, we are also something infinite, which is the Atman. Because Atman is the entire cosmos, not in a physical sense, in the potential to get the meaning of. And therefore, this life is worth living. It's full of excitement. The doors that you open related to your perception can lead you to knowledge and experience that is a million times more exciting and wonderful than what we experience outside. You see that? Most amazing stuff. Most extraordinary stuff. Now, now you might ask, why haven't things with this amazing, these are just two or three, there are 10,000 amazing insights one can talk about. But a question, especially the young ask, hey, if there was all this wisdom, then why did India get into the bad place that it was for a long time? Right? That's a bad question to ask. Now one can go to historical processes and politics and war and this and that is a certain perspective. But there is a deeper perspective which I want to talk about, and this is expressed in the Ishavasya Upanishad. The Ishavasya Upanishad, which is one of the deepest of the Upanishads, says, if you remember it, Antam tamha pravishanti ye avidyam upasate. Into blind darkness fall those who worship avidya, and avidya means materiality. Materiality is avidya. Okay? So who believe that the universe is nothing but materiality, which is the current zeitgeist of our times, fall into blind darkness. But after this, what it says is, Tato bhuyo ivte tamo ye vidyayam rataha. Into deeper darkness fall those who are absorbed only in vidya, into personal growth, right? So what it says is that you have to have a balance. I think what happened in India is that balance was lost. You must do both. You must look at the outer and the inner, and that's got to be harmonious. And I think that's where things did not go very well. And I think it's very wonderful, and I think Vivekananda also speaks about it, that we need both the wisdom of India, this incredible wisdom of India, and the energy that the West has shown in the last 4 or 5 centuries related to the outward. But personally, I think that that now, with we having entered the machine age, the machine of computers, and this whole danger of machines, danger and also a wonderful opportunity that machines do all that was difficult, laborious, repetitive, boring. Machines will do that. But then what will humans do? Even if you had universal basic income, that's not going to provide happiness, right? That will be a dystopia. And that's what we are going to. Although there are a lot of tech titans speaking of universal basic income, and there have been some experiments, one in Finland, I think there's something in the US as well, they're trying to look into it, but that's not going to be it. So I think the time has come, in my view, that this potential that also some of the greatest scientists of the 20th century, and I talked about Schrödinger, for example, who did see this very clearly, this thing about consciousness being apart from physicality, that this needs to be promoted, not promoted because it's ideology to be promoted, but this is the deepest wisdom that there is. Otherwise, how do you explain how creativity occurs? Okay, you know the story. Everybody knows the story of Srinivas Ramanujan, right? Everybody knows this great mathematician from Tamil Nadu who died at the age of 32, right? He was a self-taught mathematician, and he sent these formulas to G.H. Hardy, who was a famous mathematician in England. He was so astonished, so he brought him there, and then he got a degree, but then he fell sick. He went back to India and he died. So the last 6 months or a year of his life, when he was in this feverish state, he was dying, he scribbled on notebooks. And then he died, and these notebooks were lost. And they were rediscovered in the 70s by mathematicians. And last 40 years, they've been investigating these notebooks, and there are thousands of formulas. And he didn't explain where this math came from. And literally everything is correct. Okay? So where does this come from? And this is what he had done before he had even gone to England. And people had asked him, where does this come from? And he would answer, he would say the goddess Namakal, who's his family goddess, or Namagiri, she comes in my dreams and gives me the formula, and I just write them out. Now you might say that this is just a poetic way of saying that I just thought of it, right? Okay, I'm not saying that one should dismiss, one should not be skeptical, but truly, or you have Kekule in 1862 discovering the structure of benzene, which a lot of chemists had been working on, and they didn't know what to do. Then I think he was at his office, and he was dozing off, and suddenly he saw this image of 6 snakes in a ring, each holding the tail of the other. And he woke up, he says, yeah, 6 carbon atoms in a ring. Carbon molecules, whatever. Right? Atoms in a ring. That's benzene. Or in 1845, what changed the world changed in America, as you know. Industrial Revolution, 1845, Jeffrey Howe, who invented the sewing machine. A lot of people were trying to do the sewing machine, because at that time, women used to spend a lot of their time doing, stitching up clothes, darning clothes, this or that. And a lot of people wanted to create a sewing machine, and they had been unsuccessful inventors. And he saw a dream with an Indian throwing a spear with an eye in the spear. He woke up, so he knew that what he needed, not an Indian, Amerindian. So he saw that what he needed was a needle with a hook. This is a simple idea, but the simplest ideas are the hardest to get, because you don't know what to do. So the question then is, if creativity is actually peering into oneself. Now you might dismiss it, you might say it's all inductive knowledge, but you really can't explain it that way. You can retrospectively, after something has been written, you can explain it, right? Or you can look at the sonnets of Shakespeare or anybody's, and you can say, hey, well, it's actually quite straightforward because all those phrases have become a part of the language, right? But at that time, it was all new. You see that? And this insight that the more you look for creativity, the more it recedes from you, is one of the fundamental intuitions of the Vedic way. And I'll explain to you now. A lot of people in South India, some in the north as well, do the Shree Chakra. You know about the Shree Chakra. These are these triangles, 9 triangles, who represent Purush and Prakriti, right? The goddess and the god, right? In fact, the very symbol of yoga is, the male triangle, which is the Purush triangle, and the Devi triangle, right? The other triangle, right? So there are 9 of them, and these are supposed to represent the cosmos, both the outer and the inner. That is what Sri Chakra is. And because the whole idea is that there are 3 different layers associated with reality. That's why you have Bhu, Bhuva, Swaha, right? The earth, the atmosphere, and the skies or the sun. In all perceptions also, even in sentences, you have the subject, object, and the verb. So the whole idea is that there is a tripartite nature to reality. Okay? Now, so this is the universe, Sri Chakra or Sri Vidya, right? And I don't know if you've noticed that right in the middle of Sri Vidya is a dot. And the dot represents Purush. So Sri Vidya is material reality, and we are also material reality. We are not disputing that. But the consciousness is that dot, infinitesimal, because you can't see it. You see that? In fact, in one of the most amazing traditions related to consciousness, arose explication. It's not counter to the Vedas at all. Arose in Kashmir, which is where I'm from, where there is a sutra called the Shiva Sutra. And it's the very first of the sutras says, Chaitanyam Atma, that this consciousness itself is Atma. Consciousness itself is Ishvara, right? And then it says what's to be done, etc., etc. So the whole idea then is that the more you look for it, in retrospect, you're looking back at the past, you can say, well, this was to happen because certain such things happened. You can always spin stories. But at the moment in time where the fabric of time has not yet revealed what lies on the other side, where it's going to go is not so obvious. Even in various tantric systems, these things are actually common knowledge, which is why Shiva in the frightening representation that the Bengalis have, that the Shaktas have. As you can see, you have the goddess Kali, who represents time, right? Dancing or standing up, and Shiva is lying dead, because you can't see it. Do you see that? So these are extremely subtle things. The whole thing about consciousness is that it's extremely subtle. The more you try to bind it, because you can only experience it. You cannot describe it. Words will always fail, right? In fact, Mundak Upanishad, one of the Upanishads. Upanishads, you know what Upanishads are. Upanishads are these amazing texts. Amazing. And the word Upanishad, does anybody know the meaning of the word Upanishad?
Yeah. Discussion between teacher and student.
Right. Upanishad is exactly the same word as understanding. And I'll explain to you why. You know why the word understanding is understanding? Does anybody know? Understanding. Okay, I'll explain to you. Yeah, I'll explain to you. I was, a few years ago, I was at Coimbra University in Portugal, which is one of the oldest European universities. And I went to a classroom. These are old, 700-year-old classroom. And in the classroom, what you see is that on the second level, there is an opening. That's where the teacher would appear from the opening. And all the students would be standing below. So understanding, right? In India, the teacher would be sitting under the tree. Indians are sort of used to comfort. Under the tree on a platform, and below the platform, let's say this is the platform, and below the platform would be all the students. So, sit in Sanskrit is shad, sad. Sad, sit, because they are related languages. Sanskrit and English are related languages. Sad is sit, shad. Ni is near, like near. And up is next, near, sit, which is like understanding, right? Different things. So, Mundak Upanishad, one of these amazing Upanishads, says there are two kinds of knowledge. Apara and para. Okay. Apara and para. Para is like, the word para is like far. Apara means not far. Is opposite, right? In English also. If you have a in the beginning, that often reverses the meaning, right? Atypical means not typical. So, not afar, because afar has another meaning also, but not far is apara. And para is like far. Okay. So what the Upanishad says is this. It says that, look, all the knowledge that you gain through books, and whatever books those are, like astronomy, like sociology, or physics, or grammar, is apara, because it can be bound in words. You can describe it, and that's how you can write the grammar of any language, or you can tell stories, sociology, physics, they're all stories. Science is all stories, right? No matter what scientists tell you, they're only telling stories, right? And they are of some validity, but they're beyond their domain, they don't work. But according to the Rishi, the knowledge related to the experiencing self is para, is far. Because you cannot turn the gaze onto yourself. Because in order to create a science, you have to put your gaze on that subject matter. And the moment you put the gaze on it, you can bind it in words, because you're seeing it. It's being done through your eyes and your senses. So it's open to analysis through your senses. But you cannot turn the gaze onto yourself. The way, and so that is para. That is the ultimate objective of the Vedas. That is the ultimate objective of all the practices, is to gain para knowledge, is to gain this extraordinary knowledge. And this is gained in a variety of ways. The Vedic system is not dogmatic. It says you can do it whichever way appeals to you based on your temperament, the kind of personality you have come up with, and the way you live also changes you, right? And then you have to connect it. If you're inclined to the arts, you can be absorbed in the arts, and that's your sadhana. And through the arts, through dance or painting or singing, also you can achieve divinity. You can obtain, be connected to divinity. Or you can do it through the sciences. Or you can do it through upasana, right? Sit next to divinity, upasana, next to the asana, take the asana next to the divinity, you do your puja or whatever. If that's what appeals to you, but you don't have to do any of this. You see that? So whichever way appeals to you, then you might say, what is the proof? You can say, hey, aren't you deluding yourself? What's the proof? The proof is transformation. It changes you. That's the proof. It changes you, it makes you totally different. It gives you uncommon knowledge that others don't possess or you didn't possess yourself. So there is proof. And you see that within yourself. Right? So, astonishing, truly astonishing. And let me see, yeah. Are we closing sharp at 8? And do we want some discussion as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
And just as a reminder for most of the audience, we do have some snacks also, so this can go on.
Okay, all right. So I think, given the times that we live in, given the potential of the whole humanity going off in a direction which can be wholly destructive in so many different ways. People are doing various things with the best of intentions, but if you think that the whole universe is a machine, which is what the elites believe, right? If you go to any university, the knowledge system behind all of this is that there's nothing but machines, right? The whole universe is a machine. In fact, people actually write papers in scientific journals. The whole universe is a machine. And then they have many papers on, is it an analog machine or a discrete machine? Huge number of papers. That's what most careers are all about. So, it's not a machine. There is a mystery. That's what I'm saying. You may take it or not take it. There is a mystery. And it's the most amazing thing. The future can be most wonderful. There is, during the medieval times in India, the idea arose that the whole society, world society goes through various cycles. You know, there is a fall, slowly, from in good times, worse times, Sat Yuga, Krita Yuga, Treta, Dwapar, Kali Yuga. We live in the age of Kali Yuga, right, where there's confusion. And there is confusion, right? But then you again go on to a golden age. And I truly believe we have reached a moment where there is this potential. If people knew what it was, which is where, does this even exist? I can tell you this. I have a few friends, their children. In fact, one of them just wrote me a very poignant letter yesterday. This very smart guy, degree from Ivy League school. He's in a tech company in the Bay Area, and he wrote to me. He says, "Look, all that we were doing was just to sell this stuff. We have this algorithm." And then he says, a couple of months ago, my boss came and he said, the train ran over this person and this person died a horrible death in 40 minutes. And after he told the story, then they were again pushing at how do we, get more people and so on. He says that afternoon he's resigned. I know a lot of very, very smart young people who say, we're not going to do it. What does it all mean? Now, you might say, but isn't that being too naive? Because the world has always been like this, right? As the great Western novelists say, misery is the human condition. One could make that claim, right? But at least there was some fundamental connection to nature through hard work, through sweat, through whatever one had to do. One was connected to a larger family unit, right? But now, in all their wisdom, people said, no, everybody for himself or herself. And then you and your machine. So people are alienated from nature and from themselves, which is the cause of this most horrific anxiety and angst that you can see amongst a lot of people. And so things cannot go on. So it appears to me that we are at this very historic moment where people all over, I travel quite a bit in all countries, and you find people, say, in Russia, in East Europe or Australia, they're all saying, we want to know, what does it all mean? Because in the past, just think, in the past we had universities, right, libraries, so you went to the library, you picked up some stuff, and then you went back to the library from time to time, because this is a very rare information, and you spent 3 or 4 years, soak yourself in it. But all that is not needed. All that information is a finger tip away, right? So this is all a drama. for certain skills, you do need to go to a university, right? You're learning some specific skills with certain machines and programs. But according to this professor at Harvard University College of Education, I forget his name, but I quoted him in an article I wrote for the Smithsonian. He says in the next dozen years, half the colleges and universities in America will go bankrupt. They'll go bankrupt. They don't need all these professors because you can have just a few in studios in some place, and their lectures can be beamed to everybody, right? And then all the media that we have, including NPR or PBS, or other channels, could be providing information through one's own life. So why do you have to spend 50K, 60K, 70K when per year, which is what education is amounted to, which was not the case 40, 50 years ago. Education was literally free in public schools, even in the US, right? So now, at some point, the whole system will come crashing down. So there are lots of such signs which tell us that in this age, at this moment in time, we also owe it to our children to give them the tools to be able to navigate their way through the world. Because it's going to be a very difficult world. The skills that you may have learned may not be important 2 years from after you've graduated. So you have to keep on learning all the time. So, who was it? Charles Dickens or somebody. These are the worst of times and these are the best of times. These are the worst of times. These are the best of times in terms of material prosperity, but the worst of times in terms of challenges that lie ahead. But they're also the best of times in the potential, the way of the spirit, which is what I call the Vedic way. It's universal, it's not sectarian, it belongs to everybody. It must be confirmed by each person, wherever they are, whichever society they are. And it opens up doors within oneself and also serendipitously outside. All kinds of, once your doors open, when you truly believe in something, that idea of sankalpa, things change around you. So I think this is an amazing moment where we all can change the world. So, let's see. Oh, exactly 60 minutes. So, I don't want to go over. But I've really enjoyed being here and speaking to you. And I'll be more than happy to answer questions that you may have.
So my question is on the machines. Like, even I believe like you, that machines cannot get consciousness. And the reason I believe it is, I have not gone to school on any things like that. But I believe that, like us, we have as much water in us as there is on earth, as much matter. So I don't know if human beings can build something that's so interrelated for consciousness to ever emerge in something we build.
Okay, okay, that's fine. But it's also possible that biological machines could be invented in future. It may also be conscious. And what would be a biological machine? It would be a new form, new organism. So we don't know.
Would it be so related with everything, like the food we eat? We are so related with the cosmos, or so related that wouldn't it be impossible to make a machine like that?
No, it's fine. I mean, let's just leave it at that. I think that's a good point. Okay.
I was very struck by the sharp distinction you drew between non-material consciousness and the material world. And I wonder what you think about two other ways of looking at this relationship. One is my understanding of Geshe-Shaivism that has the 27 tattvas ranging from consciousness to the most mundane, and they are said, in my understanding, to coexist. That there isn't, that it's an interwoven system. So that's one way in which, or one strand of thought that seems to me at least to posit a lack of separation between consciousness and the material world. A very different one is panpsychism, which attributes to matter a new property that we haven't usually thought of in relation to matter, which is the potentiality to create conscious systems. But that is inherent in matter in much the same way as mass or charge or some other physical property. I wonder what you think about that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let me sort of address this by telling you this little story about Nikola Tesla and Swami Vivekananda. I don't know if you've heard of it. In 1896, the most famous actor or actress in the world was Sarah Bernhardt. She was a French woman, and she was on a tour to New York, and everybody knew Nikola Tesla. He was the most famous engineer of his time. He had beaten Thomas Edison because he was promoting three-phase. Edison was promoting DC. So she threw a party, and she brought together Tesla and Vivekananda. Vivekananda was in New York at that time, and the two of them met. And there is a record of what transpired. The record is both in Vivekananda's works and the letter that Tesla wrote later on. In fact, I wrote a paper on this, and you can Google it, and you'll see the actual text. So Vivekananda tells Tesla, he says, look, first of all, from matter comes energy. Can you prove it? So Tesla said, okay, I think I should be able to do it. So he said, energy and mass should be connected. And the reason why he suggested that was that there is a school, one of the darshanas in India called the Vaisheshika, where there is a beautiful description of both the 5 elements and the observation process. In fact, I translated the Vaisheshika Sutras. It's in a book called Matter and Mind. You might want to see it. It's only 99 cents in the Kindle edition. So, what is stated very clearly, and not only in Vaisheshika, but also in the Mahabharata, in the Puranas, or in that great, great book from Kashmir called Yoga Vasishta. So it's stated when the world comes to an end, there is an involution. Firstly, earth becomes water, water becomes fire, I'm using English words, fire becomes wind, and then wind becomes ether, then it's all becomes a part of consciousness. So in other words, within consciousness is the seed of everything. So it should be here as well. But in the Vaisheshika or in the Mahabharata, etc., it's stated as something that happens in extreme situations. And in evolution, it's the reverse. So from consciousness arises a certain wind, from where arises fire, from where arises water, and from water arises earth. Now what's interesting in Vaisheshika, and this is about, people say, 600 BC. Vaisheshika says there are 4 atoms. It's also called an atomic theory. 4 atoms, like Kanada, the Rishi's Kanada. 4 atoms. 2 of them have mass. One of them is predominant mass, another is also mass. This predominant mass represents earth. The second mass represents fluidity, because any substance when heated becomes liquid. And this is the argument in the commentaries. And if you heat it even more, it burns. So from there comes light, right? And if you do it more, it decays, and that is the wind. So astonishing, astonishing. Kanada says Two of them have mass, two do not. Look at modern physics. Proton, electron have mass. Proton is predominant mass. Photon and neutrino do not have mass. So where does this all come from? Isn't this astonishing? Where does this all come from? It comes from within. And personally, I think, you really convinced yourself. And so, to answer your question, yes, everything is there. Consciousness is not apart. But ordinarily, it's as if, this is what Maya means. There is a certain veil of, there is a veiling. The Maya is that power of veiling. So you can't see that. In order to see through that, in order to be able to create, you have to go and have access to the very fount of that power within yourself. And if you do, you become divinity yourself. You become point of light, divinity. Div in Latin or Greek means light, right? That source of light. I must tell you, there's this amazing dialogue in the Bhagavad Puran. Bhagavad or Mahabharata? One of these two. Okay, the dialogue is this. Yudhishthir comes to Narada. Narada is this celestial rishi. So he says, how am I to live life? So Narada says, okay, how you have to live life is, first of all, you have to educate yourself. So you have to discipline yourself. And once you have educated yourself, you have truly done it properly, you will arrive at all kinds of paradoxes. And the moment you experience those paradoxes in all their fury, you would then be transformed. And that recognition of that paradox, experiencing, living of that paradox, is that second birth. I was talking about what is sacrifice, what is yajna. It's to see that paradox. Of course, Hinduism is also about all these wonderful stories for children, like this huge Ganesha riding a mouse, right? This is just to, make you think, hey, what does it really mean? What does it really mean? See that? So it's all within. So the whole idea of the Vedic way was to show you a method so that while born as humans, we have become walking devatas ourselves, to show us a path of light. It's not about anything else, it's about a path of light. And it's that light that we need, especially now, that by embracing only avidya, materiality. There's also the fundamental story in the Vedas, the churning of the ocean. On the one side you have the devas, on the other side you have the asuras. Who are the asuras? Asuras are those who believe in materiality. Devas and asuras. So there's got to be that churning of the ocean within each person. You will get access to uncommon intuition and wisdom, uncommon gifts, because when the ocean is churned, all kinds of wonderful vibhutis arise, jewels and this and that, and ultimately you also have the nectar of immortality. But before that, before all of that arises, what arises first is the worst horrible poison, the Kalakut poison, right? Which Ishvara has to then hold in his neck. That's why Nilakanta, right? And what does that really mean in simple language? What it means is the path of the Vedas is the path of the warrior. It's the path of extreme danger. It's the path also of great fear. If you're not strong enough, don't look for wisdom. You see that?
Yeah.
That's what that poison is. You have to look with that, and it changes you.
Needed some inputs on the parallel words, parallel universe, which you sometimes hear about. And how is consciousness connected? Is it connecting up all the universe? Or is it something only a fictional imagination?
Well, the idea of parallel universes, etc., that's all a mathematical idea. that, as you know, it arises from the many words, interpretation and so on, that the whole idea that these possibilities in quantum mechanics, or if you look at the whole universe as a quantum state, have other potentialities which are realized elsewhere. This is all mathematical fiction. But within the Puranas, I think it's Brahma Vaivarta Purana, there's a very interesting story. It says that just as you have the solar system here, there are other solar systems. There are an infinite number of systems, infinite number of lokas. So, and well, exoplanets, which have been discovered recently in the last 20, 30 years, suggest that indeed there would be other places where life would be possible.
I have a question regarding, I think, one of your topics, which is about Aryan invasion theory, which I think you did some research. This is probably one of the most deceptive and decisive theory pattern for India. And of course, the modern science, genetic research, linguistic research, has proved this theory to be completely bogus, So I want to hear about your thoughts about it.
Sure. It is indeed a interesting fact that European languages and Indian languages are connected. They're very, very similar. Look at Sanskrit and Latin and Greek and even English. This persistence of certain forms. For example, the famous Mahavakya, neti, neti, not this, which is like no it, right? Neti, neti. It's almost the same in English as well. So how do we understand it? Clearly, there has been connection in the ancient past between Europe and India. Without going into all the details, and I have a book on it called In Search of the Cradle of Civilization, but let me just give you one interesting element to this question which is not normally discussed. It is believed by population scientists who estimated the population of the world and different regions in the world for, going back 2000, 3000 BC, based on settlement remains, archaeological complexes, etc. It's believed that the so-called Indo-European world, 90% of the population was, let me not talk about the Indo-European world. During the Harappan period, 90% of the population of Eurasia was in India. So if you say that the Aryans came to India after the Harappan world, how could a handful of Aryans from the steppes, where the population is very, very limited, steppes cannot support much population, they could not have displaced whatever language existed in the Harappan world, right? So this doesn't stand. In fact, in sort of levity, I wrote a column on it called Division by Zero. I said, look, in mathematics, when we divide by zero, we know that we made a mistake. There are certain rules. You're not allowed to divide by zero because otherwise you could show that 2 is equal to 3, right? 2 by 0 is equal to 3 by 0, right? But in the social sciences, there are these traps that people can fall into. And then people fall in love with the theories. And if they are a part of an academic discipline, they are not going to drop them quite easily. So these are only stories. And I personally think that there is no merit at all in this story.
I just had a question. You made a comment about that the observations can lead into actualization. Did you mean that as an observer, the Atma within us can lead to that? Could you expand on that a little bit? Or did that mean the sankalpa of it?
Well, this statement can be parsed at many different levels, right? Because the question is, who am I? The moment you ask this question, you have all kinds of problems. Why? Because who am I? I'm my memories. Or I'm in that present. I hardly reside in the present. I'm either thinking about the past or thinking about the future, right? So who is my true self? Ramana Maharshi used to tell people that, right? If you want to know yourself, ask the question, who am I, right? So we can simplify. We can say who I am is the sankalpa or decision I have made to do something. So at that moment, you place your mind in a certain orientation. One could use that term. You just decide, I'm going to do this and this, or I'm going to see this, right? Even though mind, it's not so clear what it is, right? It's an instrument according to yoga. It's just an instrument. It's an antahakaran. It's an inner instrument, right? So it's really a sankalpa. I think you made a wonderful observation there. It's a sankalpa. You decide to do this. The moment you decide to do this, now we're talking about it at a very low level. The moment you decide to do something, you've changed the world. And I think Sigmund Freud also had this insight. He says, once you recognize a problem, you know you mastered it, right? The hardest thing is to recognize a problem. Even associated with oneself, one's state of being well-being or not well-being. So sankalpa, right. So I think this is a wonderful point which could be expanded on, that who we are is a whole sequence of these sankalpas. And these are minor ones, which are the moments when we are free. Because you could also say, as some neuroscientists have said, that whatever you do is already decided in your brain. You know, there are some famous experiments, for example, where they've traced build-up in the specific motor cortex activity before you take a conscious decision to press a button, right? A few hundred milliseconds. But I don't accept it, because you can then say that there's no free will. I don't accept that. I think we do have free will. And the idea of free will lies beyond science, because in science you cannot have free will. Or if at all there is free will, it's just a kind of a illusion of free will, right? But I think we do have free will. We have the freedom to change, and that's what the Vedas really mean. That if the Devas are creating this world, we are channeling Devas, right? Through sankalpa, the right kind of sankalpa, we then have the capacity to change the world.
Thank you so much. This brings our evening to a close. I think 1 hour goes by really quickly. We could be here for a lot longer. So on behalf of HSMN, thank you very much, Dr. Subhash Kak, for coming here today. And thank you for everyone for being here. So hope you've left here feeling a little bit more enlightened. Thank you again.
Thank you. Really enjoyed it.